Hey, you know that level Artificial Ascent? It's got like 1.3 million views on the verification video, and it's also got an insane amount of sequels, spin-offs, and sequel spin-offs. When I say insane, I mean it. Check some of these things out. And we also have this masterpiece. There are at least 7 levels based on AA, so this can probably be considered one of the most successful mega collabs ever. No other level has ever created such a want and need to remake it. It really makes you wonder why all these people have done this and what the motivation behind the sequels was. What if I told you though, that Artificial Ascent was originally going to be a remake itself? But of what? Yep, that's right. Artificial Ascent was originally a remake of one of the most popular levels ever, Cataclysm. And you might be wondering how I know all of these, and here's my secret. So it turns out that there are only 2 names shown at the end screen of the level, the Verifier, Combined, and LmAnubis. Now, not many people know about this LmAnubis guy, but I think he's most well known for his legendary level, Captain's Voyage. Unlike LmAnubis, who made the revolutionary level CV, I've only made garbage levels, such as Serpent's Wrath. But if we actually scroll up from my oldest levels, you'll see... Wait, what if... Oh, that's right. In 2018, I changed my name from LmAnubis to LmAnubis. I started Artificial Ascent and was the official host for around half of its development. Also, as I'll get to later, I actually built gameplay and decoration for the level, but you all just think it was made by somebody else. I thought it would be fun to go over the story on how a Cataclysm remake turned out to be a completely different level and into one of the most well-known levels and level series to date. Unlike most mega collabs nowadays, this level didn't start out with a clickbait layout for the next hardest extreme demon. In fact, there was no video of it at all for the first few months of development. Artificial Ascent started out with a song that I found on Newgrounds, and no, it was not Surface by Dimrain. Often when I wanted to start a new project, I would spend hours on Newgrounds looking for something that could fit a themed level. Or, of course, I just chose another Waterflame song. Coming up with a cool theme would work in one of 2 ways. Either I'd have a theme in mind and search for a song using key terms related to that, or I would just hang out on Newgrounds looking for something that sounded like it could relate to some theme itself. For Artificial Ascent, I took the latter approach. Nothing was planned. Not the theme, not the difficulty, and not the type of level. I was just interested in making a fun new project, and I had no way of knowing how popular the level I was about to start would be for this community. I came across a song that sounded similar to Mr. Jazzman's song, Iron God Sakup in Hell, most well known for
God heavy breathing heavy.
The song also included a choir that made it sound like the climax of an adventure tale. The BPM was similar to that of At the Speed of Light, a song only used in 1 or 2 levels. It sounded like a mix of these 2 songs and gave me the brilliant idea to come up with a remake of Cataclysm, but with a completely unrelated design. No one had ever done this before. All jokes aside, the plan I had for this level was extremely cool and you're gonna love this. Right after finding this song, I decided on a theme and the choice was pretty clear. The dark, choir, mechanical song was perfectly pitched to make a level about an abandoned robotic factory coming to life as a wary adventurer stumbled across it. Artificial Ascent was supposed to have a theme and feel similar to Cataclysm, with different decorations. The dark factory would have started pitch black, with very little visible except for the player. Soon, wires and lights would start to light up with a blue neon light as machines around the player began to move, spark, and seemed to almost wake up. The player would soon realize that there was a reason why this factory became abandoned. Anyone who stepped foot in here was never seen again. The main shade of the level was gray, which was used for the walls of the factory and the robot components. A bright neon blue was used for the electricity, and this, in the addition to a more scary atmosphere than most levels have today, could have created one of the coolest levels ever. Let's see how well the final product held up to my original vision. With the song and a theme, I began to build what was my hardest solo project ever. I originally had no intention to create a mega collab when the level started. My plan was to make a level similar to Cataclysm with a slightly harder difficulty, but a far more futuristic and scary atmosphere. I was also going to be the verifier of the level, as I had just beaten El Dorado and I wanted to take on a harder challenge than that. The gameplay started out like Cataclysm, a slow cube into a fast wave with many size changes. I built the gameplay for both of these and then began trying to come up with a decoration style that was supposed to represent the theme I had in mind. My extremely high expectations for my own designs prevented progress and led to constant redesigns and partial implementations of the theme, all of which didn't get the exact feel of the level I wanted. You might think that things got better, but it only went downhill from here. About 1 month after starting, I lost all data on my device. This included the original song of Artificial Ascent and the original level with its attempts at the robotic theme. My work was gone, and despite countless attempts that I spent looking, I could not find the original song ever again. This was the true turning point for the level, and it began the major transition that left the project's name as the only remaining piece of the original design. If you have ever wondered why the level's name is Artificial Ascent, it's because it was supposed to be a level about a factory coming to life, an ascension of the artificial. Since this level was inspired by Cataclysm, I had to follow a very strict naming procedure. Also, because it was inspired by Cataclysm, I decided to look on Dimrain's channel for a replacement song that sounded good and had a high enough BPM as the original one did. From this, I stumbled across one of his videos titled Surface. At the time, this song had about 4K views or so I knew there was a small chance that anyone had made a level with it in GD already. It had a great rhythm and tone, a perfect combination for my project. It was about this time that the members in my stream suggested that I turn the level into a mega collab. Since I was having significant issues executing the theme I wanted, I caved in. This started my first mega collab ever. Before we keep going, let's take a quick break to thank my sponsor. Originally, I had no idea who I wanted to invite to my mega collab. I asked a good friend of mine at the time and a mod on my stream, MLG to build a part, and he ended up building the third part in the level. Up to his part, everything else was actually supposed to be designed by me, as he was still following the Cataclysm gameplay style from the beginning of the level. I was happy with his part, but it was nothing close to the original theme I wanted. The main color was blue, but it lacked the realism, darkness, and horror that I intended to implement with the project. This actually turned out to be a bigger issue than I could have ever imagined, as in 2.0, very few creators were actually able to execute the theme style. A fun fact about this part as well is that from the version that I was originally supposed to verify, this part was the one that was nerfed the most. Nerfing doesn't really matter, but it's a fun fact nonetheless. Now, despite the stray from the original theme, I decided to continue getting more people in the mega collab. The next member I spoke to was one of my personal favorites, Heinz, and they designed their part, which is now one of my favorite parts in the entire level. Again, there was a lack of theme with this part, but it looked so nice that I couldn't get them to redo anything, and it moved the level further away from the dark and mysterious theme I wanted. Back when this project was being created, one of the people who would often stop by my stream was a small YouTuber and GD player named Zobros. I asked if he wanted to create a part in the level because I knew that he was fond of my projects and would be interested. Here is a reenactment of how that went.
Zobros, will you join my mega collab? Come with me, Nub. Yes, I will join your mega collab.
Unfortunately, about halfway through the completion of his part, Zobros got busy with other things, and he ended up leaving me with a half-finished part. It was too short to have another creator design right after it, and since he had given it a fairly distinct gameplay style and decoration style, I decided to take matters into my own hands and created the second half of his part, shown on the screen now. Most people think that he designed the entire thing, but it actually turns out that I built half of his gameplay and his decoration. If you look closely, you can tell that I was inspired by Bloodbath's UFO gameplay in Etzer's part for the actual UFO in the level. I often get inspired by my favorite levels and creators when it comes to design, and this was no exception. So yes, The second half of Zobros' part in Artificial Ascent was built and decorated by me, inspired by Bloodbath. Technically then, I do actually have a part in this level that is around the same length of Zobros's, but since I was the host, I saw no point in putting my name in there. After Zobros, I got Giron David to join AA. Their part was an extremely tight wave that was super hard to master. It required significant amount of skill to complete, and it looked like an early version of the Galaxy Collapse wave. I found myself needing to practice this for hours on end just to understand the clicking pattern, and I never was able to master it. If this wave were still in the level, it would no doubt be the hardest part of it, and likely would have made AA much closer to top 1 on the demon list. The biggest issue with Giron's gameplay came from the transition between these two parts, as well as the skill of players back in 2.0. At this time, the wave was relatively impossible to get consistent at, despite looking fairly simple today. Speaking of the design in Giron's part, it was not super amazing, but it was an interesting part nonetheless. Anthrax's, or Orion's part, was then introduced, and there's nothing too interesting to talk about it. Other than the hallway at the end, which is still unfinished in the published version of AA. There was supposed to be more gameplay inside it, and I originally had spikes on the walls, but then deleted those so I could add more unique gameplay down the road, a change which was forgotten with time. Unlike Giron's gameplay, Crack's part can be found at the top of the level in the editor. This is still in the level and you can actually see it for yourself. I personally love this part and thought it was super satisfying to beat. I also thought it was really fun and challenging. It was the closest rendition to the original theme that I had intended, and so it's pretty obvious this level had strayed from my original vision at this point. I saw no productive way of returning the level back to what I wanted, so I decided to continue letting creators design how they wanted. Crack's part was one of the most visually appealing parts in the level, simply needing a little bit of movement and a few flashes to become one of the best looking parts. I wish this part had stayed in the level. I then decided to ask a small and relatively unknown builder to join the project. You may also know him. He goes by the name Viprin or Viprin. They finished their part, I practiced their part, I changed some gameplay by making a few nerfs and a few buffs, nothing too special here. But we'll talk about Viprin again later, so don't forget about them. Both Lugia's and LmAnubis parts were built during my time as the level's host, but since they have no real changes, I won't discuss them more than just saying that they were both relatively nice parts. Sometime during all of these builders creating their parts, I got a fellow Canadian, Manix 648.
I don't want to start beef, but I'm gonna put it in chat.
To work on the wave that I was having so much trouble decorating. I was still going through the process of constant redesigns for my part, and it was extremely difficult for me to come up with something that related to my theme now, because the rest of the level was so different that it wouldn't match with what I wanted. I had little experience designing levels that were not themed, aside from a few unpublished levels in 1.6, 1.9, a mega collab in 1.9 that I participated in, and a 2-person collab in 1.9 as well. Even though my viewers thought that some of the designs I made were really good, I was constantly unsatisfied, as I had no metric to compare the designs to what would be considered good. After little activity, I went silent and rarely responded on Discord. There was actually a far smaller audience for AA than you may think, as very few people actually knew about the level, and there were no massive promotional videos that had been made. The majority of people excited for the level consisted of my viewers on Twitch who watched its full development. Because there wasn't that much hype surrounding the level, I didn't think much about leaving it as an unfinished project. One of the members, however, Viprin, still had their copy from when they built in the level, and after some time, this is what happened.
MMCP MMCP.
All jokes aside, they asked if they could finish as the co-host. This level would never have been finished without them. So I guess we can all say thank you, Voopy boy. There was one final little piece of conflict that happened before the level was finished. I was originally under the impression that by giving it to Viprin as a co-host, I would still be uploading the level, since I started it and worked on it for a huge amount of time. After Viprin spent a significantly long time as well working on it, we decided that it was only fair if he uploaded the level, as without him, it likely would have stayed as an unfinished level on my account. So what do you think? Does the level that created a huge amount of sequels and remakes have a more interesting backstory than you thought? What if the gameplay had followed Cataclysm like it was originally supposed to from the start? What if the theme stayed as the uninhabited robotic factory that came to life as the player went through it? These are all really cool things to think about, but unfortunately we'll never know. Thank you for watching this video. It took about 2 weeks to make, so please consider subscribing or liking the video. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I also hope that it taught you something really interesting about one of the greatest levels ever made in GD, Artificial Ascent.